Hi, and welcome to Sociology. Today we're going to talk about social stratification and poverty. First, I want you to do a warm-up. Take out a sheet of paper. You don't have to put your name and date on it, as this will just be for you. You're going to take a 1-minute quiz of anything and everything that you can remember about stratification from the text. I want you to pause this video, take 1 minute to try to remember. This will help you to identify what else that you need to study for the final. Keep your piece of paper for our wrap-up. Okay, so let's talk about stratification. So when we talk about stratification, we can look at how our hierarchies are constructed. So when we think of a hierarchy, we can automatically think of a triangle. So within the triangle of hierarchy, those who are in power are on top. They are the smallest portion, and then it moves down to those who are on the bottom, which is the largest, generally, portion of individuals who are have the least amount of power. So then with social stratification, this is definitely an outdated model, as our middle class is not 30% anymore, but we do have larger working class, larger working poor, and a much larger underclass. So each of these layers in a stratification of society is a social class. A social class is a segment of societies whose members hold similar amounts of resources and share values, norms, and identifiable lifestyles. So this lower right-hand image, we can see that social stratification is influenced by these social constructions of class, race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and a whole bunch of other things. We can see that there is this ladder that you can climb, and social mobility and social stratification really is hinged upon the oppression and the exploitation of people. So what do we mean by stratification? Stratification is structured social inequality, systematic inequalities between a group of people. Let's look at the difference between systematic and systemic. You will need to know this, so make sure to get out your flashcards or you are taking notes. Systematic means 1, carried out using step-by-step procedures, and 2, characterized or consisting of a system. This typically describes carefully planned processes that unfold gradually. Systemic, which is a narrower definition, means system-wide or deeply ingrained. It usually describes habits that are difficult to reverse because they're built into the system. Systematic, right? So we can look at police brutality as systemic, and the procedures that are carried out step by step are racial profiling, mass incarceration, things of that nature. What do we mean by social inequality? So let's think about, how does this connect to intersectionality? We're not going to break up into table groups, but you will take 3 minutes to explore this idea, and then we will come back as a collective unit to look at how these intersect. So when we look at social inequality, remember intersectionality is what we talked about when we talked about social institutions or agents of socialization, and it reflects back onto that lower right-hand image of the ladder and how class, ethnicity, able bodies or ableism, autism, sexual orientation, all of those things influence poverty. So the myth of meritocracy. Meritocracy is a social system in which people's success in life depends primarily on their talents, abilities, and effort. The idea of a meritocratic society has served as an ideology through the argument that social inequality results from unequal merit rather than prejudice and discrimination. And we can see that within the political milieu currently, right? So this connects to the key terms of equality of opportunity and ontological equality. Make sure you know those terms. So in the lower left-hand corner, we can see, what's the matter with you? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But then the individual's bootstraps are broken, and then he's even missing one. So on the lower right-hand corner, we can basically see the same construction, but that A, they don't have any boots, and B, they are chained down by this construction of inequality that is systemic. So basically what we're saying with the myth of meritocracy is that everyone has the same chances, everyone has the ability for social mobility, but it is based on your merit, which is your talents, abilities, and effort, rather than prejudice and discrimination. And that completely erases all of these different social institutions that influence how we are structured within society and social stratification. So the myth of meritocracy is just that, right? Meritocracy is a myth. It does not exist. Although there are a lot of politicians who will argue that it does exist and that communities of color or poor communities are deficient or devoid of these innate talents and abilities. So explore the following concepts on the discussion board once you've watched this video. You are going to watch an interview with the journalist Barbara Einrich, who's the author of Nickel and Dimed. So you're going to look at why are so many low-wage workers struggling to make ends meet, even if they work full-time or over full-time? Why do her findings challenge the notion that people are poor because they are lazy or unwilling to work, referring back to the myth of meritocracy? Some people might suggest that people earning low wages should get an education and then a better job. What are the problems with this suggestion? Why does she argue that low-wage workers are the true philanthropists? And then how does this book, as it is originally a book, and then this short video is just an interview, relate to the myth of meritocracy? So what do we mean by the culture of poverty? The culture of poverty is how poor people adapt to practices that differ from mainstream society in order to survive. You will need to know this. Make sure that you have your flashcards. So what is an example from the book? What do we mean by poverty among plenty? How would you interpret this statement? And what does it mean by it's expensive to be poor? So when we think about the culture of poverty and this adopting practices that differ from mainstream society, so we can see that individuals who are utilizing illegal practices to gain what we identify as this American dream, right? So money, job, cars, capitalism, consumerism, stuff, right? So that's all part of this American dream. And so when we see that individuals with low socioeconomic status are utilizing these practices, we see that they are just in order to survive, right? So if my family is hungry and I don't have funds to be able to feed them, then I might look to stealing, right? Or I might look to, as a female identified body, I might look to practices like sex work, which would then allow me to gain access to funds. Or we look at communities that are disenfranchised. We can see how individuals with in these communities or low socioeconomic status might look towards unorthodox or illegal practices, right? And many individuals work under the table or what we identify as hustling to survive, and where we trade goods or we trade services for goods, or we get paid by individuals without reporting it to the government. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch each of these videos, and I want you to think about how each of these videos are connected to the culture of poverty, as well as the myth of meritocracy, as well as the intersectionality of the agents that have been socially constructed, like race, class, gender, sexual orientation. And then I want you to think about how these videos might have challenged your current perception of poverty. Once you have identified those 3 videos, I want you to think about or watch The New Cup, which is a video from the show Flight of the Conchords, which you may or may not be familiar with. But basically the setup is these 2 individuals are living together, and they are on such a strict budget that even purchasing a mug will ultimately end up in disaster. Next, you will complete a video game that I will put the link under this video and on the discussion board. Once you have played this game at least twice with different choices, so you're going to go through, it allows you to make choices throughout the video game that will affect the ending. You will then play it again, but making different choices throughout the video game. You will then answer the prompt questions for this exercise that are in the discussion board.